Jack and Mike, two brothers, were just there to pick up a drone, but Howard charged over with a hunting rifle. The older brother quickly shielded his younger brother and said, "We mean no harm. We're just here to retrieve the drone. We'll leave immediately." Seeing them about to leave, Howard suddenly panicked and shouted, "Don't move!" It turned out that Howard suffered from paranoia and had secretly buried a minefield with family photos in the yard. The brothers froze in place. They had been able to move around aimlessly before, but now that they knew the truth, they were directly triggered into a horror game mechanism. Howard tried to reassure them, saying, "Don't be afraid. I remember the location of every mine." But before he could finish speaking, there was a loud explosion, and Howard was blown to pieces, turning into a two-dimensional character. The brothers were terrified. At that moment, the older brother noticed that his leg had been hit by shrapnel, and his health bar was rapidly depleting. He soon collapsed to the ground. The younger brother was terrified and quickly dialed 911. The firefighters arrived at the scene after receiving the call, but the area was littered with landmines, so they dared not move. The bomb disposal team would take 40 minutes to arrive, but the team doctor observed through a telescope that the older brother, due to severe blood loss, wouldn't survive another 20 minutes. The team leader heard this and decided to immediately launch a rescue operation. He led a team member and climbed the ladder to the top. The captain threw his backpack down to test the ground. It was safe, so he jumped onto the backpack and used spray paint to draw a circle to mark the safe area. Every step they took was like playing Russian roulette. The two of them risked their lives together. The teammates behind them were worried and tense, not daring to breathe. Just as they were about to reach the boy, there was a sudden explosion. The team members were terrified, thinking the captain had been injured. But when the smoke cleared, they were relieved to find everyone was safe. The two quickly reached the brothers and found shrapnel had severed the older brother's femoral artery. Fortunately, the younger brother had been applying pressure to the wound to slow the bleeding. Under the remote guidance of the team doctor, they applied a tourniquet, injected saline solution, and began a blood transfusion. However, the older brother suddenly lost his pulse. The medic determined that blood had not yet returned to the heart and immediately instructed the team to perform CPR. After resuscitation efforts, the older brother finally regained consciousness. At that moment, the bomb disposal team arrived, and everyone finally breathed a sigh of relief. A crisis triggered by a misunderstanding had just ended, but another absurd chase was quietly unfolding. The thief, Lucas, had only stolen $5. But this triggered a global manhunt. The police, fire department, TV station, and negotiation experts were all on the scene. Even a helicopter was there to livestream the event. This is absurd, right? But it's based on a true story. At that moment, Lucas was mentally shattered, thinking, "I stole $5, not a nuclear bomb code." He also wanted to slap himself twice. There were so many escape routes. Why did he choose to climb onto the roof? Now he's trapped. But what's even more devastating is that 2 hours have passed since the incident, and everyone is just standing there watching. Howard impatiently asks the police, "Aren't you going to arrest him? Do you want him to spend Christmas here?" The police told Howard not to worry, saying, "Can't you see Lucas has a gun? The best thing to do in this situation is to wear him out. He'll surrender when he's exhausted." At this point, the firefighters were getting bored waiting, so they started betting on how long Lucas could hold out. "I bet he can last 3 hours. An hour passed, and the beautiful reporter finished her live broadcast and started chatting with the firefighters. 2 hours passed, and the bored firefighters started playing cards. 3 hours passed, and Lucas suddenly started acting like a starving wolf, demanding a plate of stinky snail noodles. Howard couldn't stand it anymore. After all this time, they weren't arresting him and were even feeding him. The police explained that it was to build trust and facilitate communication later. Just as they finished speaking, the delivery arrived. It was so fast it turned out the firefighters had ordered pizza. This made Howard even angrier. 4 hours passed in the blink of an eye. The firefighter started telling the police officer about his pickup lines. The female police captain and the male firefighter captain were also chatting animatedly. 5 hours passed, and Lucas, who hadn't gone to the bathroom the whole time, was about to burst. The firefighters had lost patience and suggested just letting him jump down. 6 hours passed, and Lucas was actually chatting with the negotiation expert about his personal life. Lucas switched to complaining mode, saying, "My mom won't give me pocket money, and my girlfriend wants gifts. I'm so struggling." However, while everyone was distracted, Howard quietly left with a ladder. At that moment, Lucas was still venting his grievances to the negotiation expert. The next second, Howard hit him with a stick, signaling the end of the battle. Homeless David crawled into a garbage bin to escape the rain, but when he woke up, he found himself being dumped into a garbage truck. He frantically shouted for help, but the driver was so engrossed in his music that he couldn't hear him. The next second, David was dumped into the garbage truck along with the trash. He quickly dialed the emergency number, because once the garbage disposal started, he would be shredded immediately. The firefighters received the alarm and rushed to the scene. They sped all the way and finally managed to stop the garbage truck in time. However, when the captain explained the situation, the driver looked confused and said there was no one in the truck because it was empty and they hadn't started collecting garbage yet. The captain immediately realized they had chased the wrong truck and quickly contacted the dispatch center to confirm the exact location of the garbage truck with the homeless man. At that moment, David's life was hanging by a thread as the driver had already started the garbage disposal unit. Fortunately, nearby police officers arrived first and immediately ordered the driver to turn off the machine. The firefighters also arrived shortly after. Upon learning that there was a person inside the garbage truck, the driver felt a chill run down his spine. After all, the crushing force of the garbage disposal unit was enough to flatten an entire vehicle. The captain quickly climbed onto the garbage truck and shouted loudly, but David did not respond. Sensing the urgency of the situation, he jumped into the truck and began clearing out the garbage with his bare hands. Other team members also rushed in to help. They threw out bags of garbage one by one until they finally reached the bottom and saw David. Luckily, he was still alive. It turned out that he had been protected by a chair. Otherwise, he would have been crushed to death by the garbage in the truck. After examination, it was found that David had multiple fractures. The firefighters secured him on a stretcher and slowly lowered him down the ladder. At this point, the class representative would ask, where did the homeless man get the money to buy a cell phone? The answer is that the U.S. government distributes iPhones more frequently than food. Thanks to this relief program, David's life was saved. David, who escaped from the trash heap, probably never imagined that someone was enduring unimaginable suffering to win a car. Emma's bladder was undergoing an extreme challenge. She hadn't used the restroom for 3 days and 3 nights. It turned out she was participating in a bizarre competition called Touch the Car, Win the Car. The rules are simple. Just keep one hand on the car the entire time and be the last one standing to win the $1 million car. All the contestants are eager to get started. With the boss's signal, the competition begins. The contestants rush to the car and place their hands on it. Everyone is shouting slogans, confident and determined to win. But soon the excitement fades, and everyone starts to feel tired. Some were so thirsty they kept drinking water, while others were so tired their backs ached. Then, a woman sneezed and her hand left the car, causing her to be eliminated first. She was instantly filled with regret. Seeing this, the others could only endure the pain. Continuing from day into night. Gradually, more and more people were eliminated. Some couldn't hold their urine after drinking too much water. Others were too tired, and some simply couldn't keep going. By the next day, only Emma and Ron were left. To win the competition quickly, Ron began persuading Emma, I'll give you $1,000 if you give up the competition. Anyway, you can't win in the end. Give up now and you can get $1,000. You can have a big meal and get a spa treatment. How nice! But Emma remained unmoved, determined to fight to the end. Suddenly, with a scream, her bladder was about to burst. Ron almost laughed out loud. The boss immediately called 911, and firefighters rushed to the scene. They learned that the 2 contestants had been standing for 28 hours, and Emma had not eaten or drunk anything for 2 days to avoid using the restroom. Based on Emma's lower back pain and abdominal fluid buildup, they diagnosed her with acute kidney failure and bladder damage. Despite this, Emma refused to give up the competition and refused to take her hands off the car. The firefighters tried to persuade Ron to give in, but he also refused to give up. The captain suggested that the boss suspend the competition to avoid a fatality. The boss, with a capitalist smile, said rules were rules. The captain asked if it was okay for one hand to stay on the car, and upon receiving confirmation, he had the team bring a chainsaw. The team immediately understood and made a move to cut the car, leaving the boss speechless. Looking at the journalists nearby, he helplessly announced that Emma and Ron each won a car. The boss stated that what mattered more than the deal was his conscience. Kudos to this boss. When Emma finally let go, another absurd rescue mission about love was about to begin on the edge of a cliff. Daniel called the police, saying his girlfriend had accidentally fallen off a cliff. Firefighters quickly arrived at the scene. The captain looked down at the cliff and saw the woman motionless. He shouted at her, but she didn't respond. The captain estimated the height and decided the chances of survival were slim. He ordered 2 team members to go down and check the situation. The medic ordered everyone to prepare for rescue, especially the medications and equipment needed for internal injuries, fractures, and head injuries. However, just as they were preparing to act, a police officer suddenly appeared. He said he had received a report from a witness who saw Daniel throw a body off the cliff. Upon hearing this, everyone became tense. Could the woman have been murdered by her boyfriend and then dumped off the cliff? The police officer then said that according to the eyewitness's description of the body, it looked very similar to a recent missing person. Therefore, the woman at the bottom of the cliff was likely the missing person. The police temporarily detained Daniel and questioned him. Daniel said that he had broken up with his girlfriend today, but she jumped off the cliff after hearing the news. However, when asked for his girlfriend's name and photo, Daniel refused to answer. This made the police even more suspicious. They could only wait until the woman was rescued before proceeding. At this point, 2 firefighters had already reached the bottom of the cliff using safety ropes. They quickly approached the woman. To better assess the situation, they turned her over. The firefighters were stunned and exclaimed, "Bro, your girlfriend is 100% silicone." Later, the captain learned from Daniel's psychologist that he suffered from some kind of attachment disorder. It turned out that he had been with this girlfriend for more than 2 years. The doctor said that Daniel's treatment had recently taken effect, so he decided to end the relationship and start a new life. The captain decided to take this opportunity to help him and staged a rescue operation. After a fierce rescue effort, the girlfriend's heart finally stopped beating. Everyone's acting was explosive, saying that she had gone to a better place. Then Daniel said his final goodbye to his girlfriend and thanked the firefighters. People with irritability are so scary. Tony saw his son being attacked during a wrestling match, so he rushed over and tried to kill the other guy. As a result, the other guy wasn't hurt, but Tony was stuck in his seat because he used too much force. When the firefighters arrived at the scene, they recognized the familiar posture and butt. The captain crawled under the chair and said, "Ha, it's an old acquaintance." Then, as usual, the medic checked if he was injured, and Tony said the same thing, "I'm just embarrassed, nothing else." However, Tony had one request: could they not use lard this time? Because the video of his lard butt was still trending on social media, the captain assured him they'd use a chainsaw this time, but suggested he see a psychologist. Always getting so angry isn't good for your health and can hurt others. The firefighters started sawing the chair, and once it was mostly cut, they prepared to pull Tony out. 3, 2, 1 done. This was going to be trending again. After being rescued, Tony looked around at the crowd of onlookers and felt utterly defeated. In the end, he decided to follow the captain's advice and see a psychologist. The next day, accompanied by his wife and children, Tony drove to the psychological clinic. On the way, he promised his wife that he would change his bad temper and become a more emotionally stable person. But just then, a drunk driver behind him kept honking his horn. Tony was about to lose his temper, but he remembered his promise to his wife and held back. He even signaled for the drunk driver to pass him. Unexpectedly, the drunk driver, after overtaking, suddenly slammed on the brakes. Fortunately, Tony reacted quickly and swerved the car to avoid a collision. However, the next moment, the drunk driver pulled out a gun. Tony quickly told his wife and child to duck down and prepared to pull over. But just then, the drunk driver threw a bottle at them, then attempted a drift maneuver but lost control, causing the car to flip over. The car burst into flames and rolled over countless times before finally coming to a stop. Tony was so terrified by the scene that he lost his focus and crashed into the car in front of him. Soon, firefighters arrived at the accident scene. Seeing Tony walking toward them, the captain assumed he was responsible for the accident again. Tony hurriedly explained that he wasn't responsible this time. He told the captain the entire story and pleaded with them to rush to save his wife and son. His wife's head was cut open, and his son's wrist was fractured. However, the medic said the ambulance was on its way, and the doctors would assist them. But the firefighters' top priority was to save the drunk man, which enraged Tony. The captain quickly stepped forward to calm him down. On the other side, the firefighters extinguished the fire, pried open the car door, and carried the drunkard out. The medic rushed over to perform emergency care, administering oxygen and chest compressions. After a while, There was finally a pulse. The firefighters loaded him onto a stretcher and prepared to take him to the hospital. The captain heard that the drunkard had a gun and ordered the team to search the car. But they found nothing after searching everywhere. Just as everyone was puzzled, Tony suddenly pulled out a gun from his pocket. The captain rushed forward to stop him, but it was too late. Tony fired 4 perfect shots, paying homage to the fast-paced chase. He ended the drunkard's life. Everyone was stunned by the scene. The captain asked Tony why he did it. Tony replied calmly, "Because he hurt my family." The flames of anger had just been extinguished when another emergency rescue operation began due to a misunderstanding. Electrician Alan was lying on the ground, convulsing. Lisa saw the wire in his hand and thought he had been electrocuted. She picked up a wooden stick from the ground and tried to pull the wire away. But the more she tried to pull it away, the tighter Alan gripped it. In a panic, Lisa swung the stick and hit Alan several times before he finally let go. Lisa quickly dialed 911. The firefighters arrived at the scene shortly after receiving the call. Lisa told them that the electrician might have been electrocuted while cutting the wires, and that she had already pulled the wires away. The medic checked Alan's condition. His breathing was normal, his blood pressure was normal, and his heart rate was normal. "This doesn't make sense," the paramedic said. "After an electric shock, there should at least be a regular heartbeat or rapid breathing." The paramedic noticed that Alan's arm was injured and his ribs were fractured. They cut open his clothes and saw bruises on his abdomen, clearly from being beaten. Lisa immediately explained that she had no other choice at the time. The paramedic noticed something else unusual. If he had been holding the live wire, his hands should have been burned. After inspecting the wire, the firefighters found that it wasn't even live. The team doctor noticed a medical alert tag around Alan's neck. It turned out he had epilepsy and was having a seizure, not an electric shock. The team doctor immediately administered glucose to replenish fluids and rushed him to the hospital. Lisa turned into a clueless netizen, unable to believe she had used a wooden stick to deliver a fatal blow to an epileptic patient. Just as Alan was being sent to the hospital, an even more bizarre life-and-death rescue was taking place in the hospital's MRI room. How terrifying is the power of an MRI machine? Bob, a reckless nurse, accidentally pushed a metal bed into the MRI room and was instantly sucked into the machine by the powerful magnetic force. Bob was stuck between the machine and the bed. The doctor immediately called 911. Firefighters arrived at the scene after receiving the call. The doctors informed them that the machine couldn't be shut down while it was running. They needed to turn off the magnets first. Although there was an emergency stop button, it was out of reach because it was blocked by the hospital bed. Now the firefighters needed to go inside and figure out how to press the emergency stop button. The captain asked who had any metal or steel objects in their bodies, as those people couldn't go in. Almost everyone raised their hands. They had all been injured during the rescue operation. In the end, only 3 male team members and a female medic remained, and they had to go in lightly equipped. Once inside, the team members first wedged a wooden board between the bed and the machine to create a gap, then inserted an airbag into the gap and began inflating it. Once enough space was created, the captain quickly pressed the emergency stop button, and the machine immediately stopped running. Bob was finally saved. The medic checked him and said he needed an MRI. Bob said he would rather die on the spot. The firefighters had no choice but to take him to the emergency room. It seems that MRI will be a shadow over his life from now on. Bob had several broken ribs, while the unlucky Eric was still trapped in the recycling bin, enduring an even longer ordeal. Eric had just been dumped by his girlfriend and, in a fit of anger, threw all her belongings into the recycling bin. Unfortunately, the car keys had accidentally fallen inside. Even worse, when he reached in to grab the keys, his entire body got stuck in the recycling bin. To make matters worse, the recycling bin door could only be opened from the outside, and his phone was still inside the car. Unable to call for help, Eric could only bang on the box and shout for help. Since the recycling bin was a sealed space and the outside environment was noisy, no one could hear him. Eric tried kicking and scratching with his hands, but to no avail. He then tried using tools to find a calculator, but while the calculator worked for basic calculations, it was useless for picking locks. He then found a tennis racket, but it was also useless. Suddenly, he had an idea and found his car keys. He kept pressing the car's "Find Me" button, hoping to attract the attention of passers-by with the alarm sound. However, not only did the passers-by ignore him, but one of them even picked up his stuffed toy. This went on from morning until afternoon, a full 7 hours. The enclosed space made Eric feel suffocated and hot, and he was about to pass out. What was even worse was that he hadn't used the restroom all day and his bladder was about to burst. So he rummaged through the junk pile and found a cup to relieve himself. Before he knew it, it was late at night. Just as Eric was about to collapse, things suddenly took a turn for the better. A team of firefighters had just finished a rescue mission nearby and were preparing to leave. The medic seemed to hear a sound and turned around, but saw nothing. Just as he was about to leave, the sound rang out again. He followed the sound and walked all the way to the recycling bin. The medic heard it and hurriedly opened the bin door. Sure enough, there was someone inside. He quickly called the captain over. Seeing that Eric was on the verge of collapse, the medic immediately grabbed a pair of wire cutters. With a snip, he cut the lock and opened the door. After breathing fresh air, Eric gradually regained consciousness. He asked the firefighters how they found him and if they heard the car alarm. Eric turned to look, but his car was already gone. It turned out that he had parked illegally, and the car had been towed away in the evening. What a terrible day! Just as Eric's car was being towed away, an even stranger couple arrived at the fire station. They claimed they would die if they didn't stand on their heads. At 2:30 a.m., Sean pushed his wife Susan to the fire station. Strangely, Susan was still upside down. The firefighters told Sean to put Susan down immediately because the position was extremely dangerous. But he refused, saying his wife would die if she wasn't upside down. Seeing the firefighters' shocked expressions, Susan quickly explained, "If I stand up, I'll die." The captain noticed the word already and realized she had died once or several times before. The captain had never seen such a situation before and called for the team doctor. The doctor checked Susan's heart rate and blood pressure, which were completely normal. This was utterly unbelievable. After all, Susan had been upside down for an hour. For a normal person, staying upside down for that long is extremely dangerous, as it can cause changes in blood pressure and even lead to cerebral hemorrhage. The doctor then asked Sean what they had been doing before coming to the station. Sean stammered out the truth, saying they had been playing a game. Susan suddenly fainted, and her heart stopped beating. Sean was terrified and tried to move Susan to the bed to perform CPR. However, during the process, Susan's head was facing downward, and she suddenly woke up. Susan thought everything was fine and tried to stand up, but she died again. CPR was ineffective, so Sean grabbed Susan's legs and pulled her up forcefully, and she came back to life again. The team doctor's CPU was overloaded. To verify their account, the doctor had the stretcher flattened, and within seconds, Susan's heart stopped beating again. They quickly turned Susan upside down, and she came back to life instantly. This was too bizarre. The firefighters had never seen anything like this before.